Welcome, everyone, to this next panel on enhancing resilience in the supply chain. I was told not to ask whether you can hear me, but it looks okay. Cool. Yes, so welcome to this super exciting panel. This morning, someone said resilience is the new return on investment. And when we think about resilience, it very much becomes also a local topic. It might be connected to the global supply chain and value chains, but it is something happening locally. And actually, 20 years ago, I had the chance to work in a landscape, which is what we will be primarily talking about today, for quite some time. And what really impressed me there is that local farmers, but also environmentalists, businesses, governments, communities came together to jointly and collectively define what a sustainable future means for their region. And that makes so much sense, right? Because it's only when everyone works together and aligns on what this sustainable future looks like that you can actually make meaningful progress. And so today I'm joined by a super distinguished panel. We have Anneke from BESTSELLER, who is involved in some of the landscapes that we will just be talking about. Then we have Heleen from IDH, who is today representing the RPLC, so the regenerative production landscapes in India and Brazil. We have Hendrik from GIZ representing the landscape work in Tanzania. We have Litul from the LAUDES Foundation convening this entire work. And we have Stephen, who is a landscaping finance specialist, a super important part of making this sustainable in the long term. And yes, so and myself, Sabine, I'm from QUANTIS. QUANTIS, we are serving large corporations on their climate and nature journeys, including regenerative agriculture, and this is where it's then very much connected to what we will be talking about today. So I will start with questions to the panel. We will be talking primarily about what is the current status of landscapes in the first round. In the second round, we will be looking into the future, also a bit of a call to action here in hopefully some of you getting more involved in landscapes. And you will see a QR code very shortly being displayed here on the screen where you can already submit questions that I will see later and we'll come back to towards the end of this panel discussion. So starting with you, Litul, LAUDES Foundation has been supporting these regenerative production landscape work for a long time, for 10 years now. So could you take us through this journey of what has happened, how it has evolved in the past?
Yeah. Thanks, Sabine. So LAUDES, as you said, started this work in 2015, and it started off as organic cotton program. So with the focus of increasing the production of sustainable cotton, and then also sourcing of sustainable cotton, and to help industry also reach its sustainability commitments in terms of sourcing sustainable material. And at that time, we worked in almost 5 countries with partners like GIZ and others, and also Organic Cotton Accelerator in scaling organic cotton. We also worked with Better Cotton Initiative, and for organic cotton, we worked with around 100,000 farmers. And we saw a lot of positive impacts in terms of farmer incomes growing, cost going down. But there were still a lot of systemic barriers at the farmer level, which was kind of impacting the work on the ground. And also we also saw that there's a lot of from the brand's perspective also interest in going beyond just supporting farm level interventions, but also looking at nature, or also looking at how it can positively create impact at the community level. And then the barriers which I want to mention, so if you're talking about regenerative agriculture, you see like, degraded lands, water, or like, access to capital for farmers. Those are also kind of impacting how the full potential a farmer can reach, or like, what a brand can in terms of, sourcing from a particular region. That's when in 2020, we started the first regenerative production landscape project with IDH in India. And then now we are working with like GIZ in Tanzania, WWF in Pakistan, and IDH in Brazil. And we have now around 1 million hectares of land under Regenerative Production Landscape Collaborative. We have also brands like, Bestseller here, which is a partner, and other brands as well. And we do see like, it kind of now also with like a lot of regulations coming in, and then commitments as part of SBT, and it makes sense for to support this model of multi-stakeholder coalition, where you are bringing together different stakeholders who have stakes in that sourcing region. So yeah, that's broadly has been the journey of LAUDES so far. Yeah.
Super nice. Thanks so much. I mean, it's great to see how you managed to convince different stakeholders that all eventually have the same target of transforming a landscape and making it really sustainable in the long term, increasing this resilience we alluded to at the beginning, and to bring everyone together is fantastic. Maybe turn it to you, Anneke, at the Bestseller. You are quite involved in this landscape work as well, together with the partners. How is this relevant for a company like Bestseller? Also knowing that we potentially have some companies in the audience that are keen to hear how they can get involved.
Yes, thank you so much, Sabine. And yes, I think first of all, I would like to say that RPLC we see it as a wonderful opportunity for us to look further into, the sourcing that we have. We all know that we have a responsibility for our supply chain, and it goes all the way back to Tier 4. We have done a lot of work to get traceability. We know how difficult it is to get traceability all the way to our raw material suppliers. But with our direct-to-farm projects, we have actually get the traceability that we want. So this is a project that Bestseller has initiated a couple of years ago. And we're sourcing directly from the farmers. And now this RPLC gives us actually an opportunity to build upon that, because we want to look further. What can we do more? Because what we know is that the farm and the cotton that we source from that farm is, depending on a healthy ecosystem, and vice versa. It's so important that it works together. And I think we start to understand that shift, that we need a healthy ecosystem, and that we're so dependent on it, and that protection is just not optional anymore. So we need to protect those healthy ecosystems. We need to look more holistically at the landscape. So besides looking at a farm and looking at regenerative practices at a farm and maybe preserving some biodiversity and looking at farmer livelihoods, we like to look at it holistically. And that is actually what RPLC is offering, looking at the landscape holistically. And that also gives us then the opportunity to have a resilient supply chain, hopefully in the future. So yeah, through RPLC, we hope that we can learn from others, work together with the different stakeholders in the landscape, that we can actually pilot regenerative practices, that we can pilot some landscape approaches. It's not going to be perfect from the start, but we're going to learn, along the way. And hopefully the participation that we have with RPLC will show that we have a commitment in this sourcing, and also that we hopefully inspire others to join as well, because we don't want to be the only ones, of course, doing this. But yeah.
Super, yeah. Thanks so much. I mean, the commitment from brands is so extremely important to contribute to this multi-stakeholder approach. Heleen, maybe turning to you, you're representing the RPLCs in India and also Brazil. RPLC, the Regenerative Production Landscapes, right? We tend to use these abbreviations. So how does it work practically on the ground? How are fashion brands currently engaging, for example, with the landscapes you work with?
Thanks, Sabine. Anneke already touched on it. So I think through three ways. First of all, through sourcing, through lifting the cotton. So we support farmers to adopt regenerative agriculture. Obviously, that cotton needs a market. So we facilitate that connection between the farmers and the markets, brands like Bestseller. Secondly, we need contributions. We need financial contributions towards our landscape activities. So other than training farmers, we also do many other activities. For example, training farmer producer organizations or ecological restoration of off-farm areas. Or setting up bio-input resource centers so farmers have better access to biological inputs and will therefore it's easier for them to reduce the use of agrochemical inputs. And then thirdly, other than sourcing, financing, it's also, I think, a real opportunity for brands to come together in a pre-competitive way and be part of our multi-stakeholder governance structures that we have set up in the landscapes. And it's an opportunity for brands to provide strategic direction to the program and sit around the table with farmer representatives, with government representatives, with NGOs, with civil society, with brands or companies from other sectors as well. So we also work with the food companies as well, because a cotton farmer is never just a cotton farmer. They will also grow food crops as well. And so we take this kind of multi-sectoral approach. So yeah, it's like I said, an opportunity for brands to really understand the issues that are relevant in their sourcing regions.
Clear, yeah. Yeah, and this is really in the raw material sourcing, right? Where not every brand today has access or a direct way to influence. Cool, thanks so much. And Hendrik, you're based in Tanzania and you work with the landscape in Tanzania. How is that where you are? How do you engage with fashion brands, and what is maybe different to what Heleen just pointed out?
Yeah, thanks, Sabine. I mean, we work with this same approach, RPLC in short, and learn from each other and try to implement the same things, yet every landscape is different, every sourcing region is different. And as such, in Tanzania, I would say there are, and even in the beginning when we started, there were less inclusive supply chains, basically. And I have to go back, Litul mentioned the work before RPLC, when we just supported the growth of the organic cotton sector in Tanzania. Tanzania in the world of cotton is very small. But over the years, we started in 2017 with 4,000 farmers. And over the years supported making Tanzania the largest organic cotton producer in Africa and the 5th largest in the world. And I think it's one of the largest sourcing regions for organic and or regenerative certified cotton now. But there's still some, I would say, lack in terms of supply chains and longer term sourcing commitments. That is a bit of a difference to Brazil and India. We try to work rather from where we are, and we have a very committed private sector in Tanzania. We're working with 4 cotton ginners directly. Under those 4 cotton ginners, there are 70,000 smallholder farmers that are certified organic and regenerative. And these cotton ginners provide extension services to farmers. And we have recently supported the formation of the Tanzania Organic Cotton Organization, which is an industry association of altogether 8 cotton ginners that are committed and do organic and regenerative cotton production. And the whole idea basically is to bring together these industry players to define a common standard, a pre-competitive standard of what does it mean to produce organic or regenerative cotton in terms of extension service provision, input provision, premiums that are being paid, and also to make sure that that it's that's a verifiable organic regenerative certification and impact on the ground.
Yeah, super important to hear also how it sounds like the landscapes, you work in the landscape where it's actually where the farmers are producing, but there is also a kind of an outreach towards other stakeholders in the local governments and even national governments or institutions, which is obviously super important to contribute to that transformation that is already on its way. Now, Stephen, turning to you, obviously financing is always a super important topic. So what are today, when we look at it today, what are the challenges that, and also maybe opportunities that landscape work is facing in terms of attracting sufficient funding for the work?
So, I mean, I think it goes without saying that finance is a prerequisite, lots of finance is a prerequisite for enabling the transition. And just to put that into some context, it's been estimated that about between $250 and $430 billion a year would be needed to get to 50% regenerative by 2040. There's about 44 billion currently being provided. Of that 44 billion, it's fragmented, it's difficult to get access to, and it's kind of siloed. So I think there are multiple challenges. One challenge is that financial institutions aren't really reflecting risk and impact in the financing equation, particularly around natural and social capital. I think there's a challenge around lack of collaboration between different finance providers across the spectrum: philanthropy, insurance providers, private sector capital, concessional, climate finance. Insufficient collaboration, and probably insufficient innovation, and particularly leverage of technology in terms of solving the access to finance problems. So I think where landscapes are exciting is that they provide the contexts within which you can experiment across all three of those barriers simultaneously, which is why we're so excited about the work that's being done with the RPLC landscape. So yeah, there are multiple challenges. We're really talking about how do you finance system change, which the finance sector isn't really geared to doing that at the moment. So there needs to be more innovation fundamentally on the within the financing sector.
Yeah, thanks a lot for pointing that out. And it brings back a bit this notion of resilience, right? That also when once risks are really acknowledged and identified in this supply chain, that different solutions, and there are many out there, landscape being one of them, really contribute to making the entire supply chain more resilient.
Absolutely.
And the financing world plays an important part in that. So I just want to send a short reminder in case you have questions to our panelists. Don't hesitate to send them to me already while we are talking. We will have a bit of time at the end to come back to them. And I mean, you heard also a bit the call to action from the panelists that the engagement is really important, and I will mention it at the end again, but in the more or less in the middle of this space, there is an exhibition of the different landscapes, and the panelists will also be there afterwards in case you want to ask bilaterally your questions. Now, I would like to turn I mean, we've heard a bit how it is at the moment, but I would like to turn towards what your wishes are for the future, as we are scaling and increasing this, the impact or the positive outcomes also of this work. And in this, I mean, Litul, you always say that it's super important to connect multiple stakeholders, for example, companies with the landscape work, but then also integrating other stakeholders, investors, etc. And of course also the farmers and the local stakeholders. What would that, in the vision of the LAUDES Foundation, what will this look like in the future?
Yeah, so I think LAUDES, as an organization, we see a lot of potential in this model. And if you see our journey, just coming back to our journey as well, we have invested around 40 million, but landscapes have leveraged around 200 million as support from the private sector, from public sector. So for everyone, there's a lot of win-win here. So you talked about investors as well. Now, I think what we need to do is, I think we've with the 4 landscapes, with this 1 million hectares and the work done by partners, the model has been demonstrated on the ground. You see some work happening with some investors coming in, but private sector really sourcing from there. But there's a couple of things which you need to do for it to scale. So one, how can you keep the beauty of this local, understanding the local context and finding local solutions, but also having a common knowledge or a framework which like an investor can understand or a brand can understand. And that's where the work which we are doing on the monitoring, reporting, and verification framework, which can like give some common like outcome indicators for brands or for like investors, is very critical. And that's something which we want to focus on going forward. And with the partners and with the help from QUANTIS and organizations like ICIL, we are looking at building that. The other piece is around finance. How can you like look at some blended finance models where like again like at the landscape level you are testing, but how can you have something at a global level as well, which can like crowd in capital for models like this. Our ambition is quite big. We want to reach 50 million hectares by 2035, and for that you'll need to unlock a huge amount of finance, and where I think it's not only philanthropy, but you have to tap into public sector funding, you have to tap into like investor funding, and so there's a lot I think which needs to be done, but it's at this level, which is at a smaller level, which is not small. If you look at it, 1 million hectare, we've been able to demonstrate it. But I think there are a couple of like building blocks, which like the claims and the finance design work, which needs to be done to reach there. So that's where I think in the next 2 to 3 years we'll be focusing our energies on.
Super, yeah, I like this ambitious vision and intention to scale. I think it's super important and also necessary to create the impact. Thanks so much. Actually, there was, maybe turning to you, Hendrik, there was also a question from the audience. Thanks a lot for handing them in. So the question is, how does it work, practically speaking, and especially there is a question, what are the barriers with working directly with farmers, maybe not seeing them as recipients, but really being part of this, the whole work and the program?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to say we work bottom up, What does that mean? It's also easy to say, hey, you farmers should produce regenerative because it's good. Yeah, we all know it's good, but these farmers have a really hard life, and their livelihood depends on what they grow. In our case, they grow cotton as a cash crop. They grow food actually to eat, and to risk your yield is a big thing. So it's easy for us to come and say this is the right way. So you need to take them and their perspectives very seriously. We are working there since 2017 now, and we can see that there's a business case. Ultimately, I think if you want to convince people to do something, it's not by going there and saying this is the right thing to do, but actually to show this is improving your life. And I think we can show with data there's a business case to grow cotton and other crops organically, regenerative, whatever you want to call it. So it actually improves livelihoods. To now also see how, it depends a lot still on extension services, on training farmers, on imparting knowledge. So we see that this is done through supply chains, basically, and it's being paid for by the supply chain because it's also a service improving yields and increasing resilience in the supply chain. That is with the farmers directly, but I think then what RPLC is about a lot as well is to look beyond the field of a farmer. I think very often in this whole debate about regenerative agriculture, we focus on the field of the farmer and the soil, but we tend to forget that there are trees around, that there are birds, that there's a whole ecosystem that is required to grow, to produce agricultural goods. So it's also working with farming communities. And I'm always amazed again when we go to villages in Tanzania, and in Swahili there's no word for climate change, yet these people can describe so much better than I could what climate change actually means and what's actually happening on the ground. And they are also incredibly resourceful and good in finding solutions, and with a bit of facilitation can actually implement solutions. And what we then try is to use that and feed that bottom up into local governance planning at district level, for example. So I think that basically is thinking from farmers, but also farming communities in how can they be enabled to be the solution to the issues they're facing.
Yeah, I see that. And I think the success you have in the landscape also shows that the farmers, but also these farming communities or beyond the farms, they really see this as an opportunity to improve their livelihoods, right? Heleen, I have another question. We know that many brands also use certification approaches, which is extremely important and is one of the solutions that we will continue to use to increase resilience in the supply chain. How do the work of the landscapes, the RPLCs, kind of build or complement more traditional approaches?
Yeah, thanks, Sabine. Yeah, I think it's a very, very complementary approach. So we really work on systems change. Our aim is to transition farmers from conventional farming to regenerative farming. And then we think about what are all the conditions that need to be in place for that to work, for that transition to take place, but also to sustain. And therefore, what we have in front of mind is how can we bring about that long-term change? So our starting point really is to put together a multi-stakeholder coalition. So these are all actors, parties that have a vested interest in the sustainability of that sourcing region, of that landscape. So these would be government institutions, private sector who buy from that landscape, NGOs, farmers themselves, villages, different levels of local government. And we take them through a process of co-designing what we call a compact, which is really a sustainable development plan. So they can decide what's the vision for their own region. And so, and we then support them, I guess, with the implementation of that vision. And we also assign responsibility for different areas in this regional development plan so that different organizations can can take ownership over the delivery. It's kind of aiming for the same impacts as certification schemes because they will also be aiming for better livelihoods for farmers, regenerative agriculture, but it's just taking that kind of systemic, systems change approach, which is just makes for a very different program.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I think that, to me, that also makes a lot of sense because in a region you would have forests, as you mentioned, right? You would have waterways, but then you have the farms and the villages, and bringing all of them together for this systemic change makes sense, and it's definitely complementary to other approaches like certifications. Now, maybe building on what Heleen said, right? So there is this transition and system change needed. And Stephen, what does that mean in, how do investors and funders that often need also to see what is or measure what is the outcome? How is that practically being done maybe today, but also how should it be done in the future?
Well, it's not done very well today, I would say. The whole of the financing system and all financial decisions depend on data, good data, ideally. The situation we have now is that bad decisions, bad investment decisions are being made because of an incomplete data set. And it's also the case that good decisions are not being made because there's an incomplete data set. And much of what we've heard there, if I think about what you just said, Ellen, through a financing lens, they are all risk reduction levers. Good governance, strong bonds in communities, interventions that strengthen natural capital that support yield. These are all risk reduction levers which impact value and stability of returns. So when we think about impact frameworks, and there's some tremendous work going into impact frameworks, we need also to be thinking about how do we translate outcome-based indicators into the language of risk, the language of value, so that as an investor, I know that that is the obvious good decision compared to the bad decision, because that data will expose that I have a huge financial risk because I have a blind spot. We're not really, I think, yet seeing investors sufficiently engaged in that debate around metrics and how to link impact around social and natural capital to investment indicators. Now, ideally, these landscapes should have a single version of the truth that is providing data to all stakeholders that meets their needs. I think the finance channel is potentially quite weak at the moment, which is why you're not getting the mainstream shifting capital. But again, I think with the RPLC framework that's being developed, there's an investor lens on that I think could make a real difference.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm taking two important keywords, right? One is reducing risks, and the other is adding value.
Yeah.
And this is super important from a financial perspective, but also from a company perspective. And turning to you, Anneke, so Bestseller has set its nature and climate targets, or is on the way of this journey. And so in the future, how are you envisioning the landscape work feeding into these targets, maybe also under this lens of reducing risks and adding value to the company and its supply chain?
Yeah, that's indeed a very interesting question, which we've been talking about a lot internally, of course, as well. And to your point, where you say, Stephen, bad choice or a good choice, you don't know. And I think also that's a little bit, we know that the RPLC it makes sense, the program makes sense, even though we might not have the data yet. So we feel that it's a good investment for now, and we need that, But now, having that said, we acknowledge that this is a learning journey, and we know that we need to get better data. So hopefully also, through this project, through this program, we're gonna get better data. So we are investing also, in this program on data collection and on how to link, like what you said, Stephen, the investment to the KPIs that we need as a company that would make sense for our climate targets or potentially nature targets in the future. And but I also think it's important to know that impact on the ground is more important than getting perfect data right now. It's a journey, like I said, that we're on, and we can test solutions with this. We know the data is important. The solutions are out there. We know how we can translate farm data towards corporate data that we need on corporate level for our climate targets and our nature targets. So we see that in the long term, we will get the primary data that we need from the farm level. And that's going to be helping us so much to get this primary data from farm level to account for us corporate accounting. So I think that is towards the data and the investment and the risk reduction.
Yeah, thanks. And I guess that's a common challenge across many companies, that really you need to get to primary data to actually be able to show progress through the interventions that you are financing or investing in financially, but can also be with offtake agreements or other type of leverages that companies have. Thanks a lot for all the questions that you have sent in. I'm trying to address a few of them. Litul, one question is to you. How do you ensure your contributions create community impact and help these communities become independent instead of relying on aid? And maybe you can start, but I would also invite other people to jump in.
Yeah, I think our partners here, of course, are like closer to the community and are doing some really great work with the community. But I think one of the key part of a landscape model is, working with the community and empowering the community as well. Like at the multi-stakeholder coalition, the community are as much involved in terms of the decision making. And our partners are also building a lot of community institutions. So if you see in India, farmer producer companies, women groups. In Tanzania, you have AMCOs, which are again like farmer cooperatives. So and they're also like, they have come together to form their own organization, which is now also directly working with different like international brands, which I think, at least when I started this work 8-9 years ago, it was like even I remember some of the initial conversations, like you are bringing big retailers and NGOs working on the ground on other issues to talk about cotton. And now, they're directly trading with some of these companies. So there's a lot which the partners are doing, but really also it would be great to hear Hendrik and Heleen from your experience of involving community.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a big trap of the work that we often do is that, we think we provide and support, but actually it's about enabling people to help themselves. And often, I think, at least in the case of our work, it's a bit of facilitation. It's a bit of just creating a platform for dialogue. And I mean, who am I to go to a rural community in Tanzania and tell them, I have read somewhere and, this is the solution for your problems. They actually know it much better. It's a bit of empowerment, and people can actually take their fate into their own hands. But it sounds so nice, I think. What obviously often is missing is funding. Yeah, there's so much you can do with your own hands, with getting together, and that we see. But there's a big funding gap. So I think that is really our role, apart from facilitating, is how can we create a platform where the right type of funding incentivizes and supports the right type of action.
Clear, yeah. I guess this is also part of why we are here, right? To attract the right type of engagement and involvement from different companies. I had some other questions, and I'm actually trying to combine a few of them around the future of cotton as a material and or as a raw material, and whether it's supposed to still grow. And whether it makes sense or is even possible to transform all of the cotton that is grown today into regenerative agricultural methods. Whoever would like to...
The first part, I'm willing, because I do think that in the foreseeable future we still need cotton. We cannot, there are innovative solutions. We see that it's out here. But in the foreseeable future, we still need the virgin cotton that is out there. So we need the resilient supply chains for us to be able to get that cotton, to produce the clothes that we have. To be honest, do we have enough, is there enough? Can we have all cotton in the world regenerative? I do not have an answer on that. I don't know if any of you have...
Because it's just a desire that it would be, but yeah, it would just take a long time. But I don't think it's impossible. And I mean, maybe also just to say, because I remember you telling me, Hendrik, from your program, there may be large swathes of Africa where farmers are very poor and they don't have ready access to artificial agrochemicals. So they've actually been farming semi-organically for decades, for centuries. And it's in countries like in India and Pakistan where they've overused artificial agrochemicals, and where we need to take farmers through that transition back to more natural farming methods. So it's not as if the task at hand is it's being conventional everywhere, and now we need to convert it all to regenerative. It's actually, in many places, you can call it pretty much regenerative, and there are other places where the more where really intense production practices have been used, and where now farmers are seeing, putting more artificial fertilizer is actually not making much difference anymore to yields, and yields are just going down and down because the soil has been so degraded. And there is actually just only one way up, which is to stop doing that and to start taking a more natural approach. So it's unavoidable in some regions.
Yeah, so it's basically also fostering and supporting the good practices that are already out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, clear.
I think the question is whether it's possible or not. It's do we have any other option?
Yeah.
I think that's also there. We really need to. So, and what is it that's stopping us from reaching there? So I think those are things which we need to discuss. Like we discuss finance, we discuss like partnership, collaborations. I think that would be something which I will. Say, we put as a question, what do we need to do to reach there so that, most of your cotton is regenerative?
Yeah. I will come soon to a closure and will actually ask you, building on our conversation, what will be kind of your takeaway or you hope that the audience will take away from this session. But before that, I have one question to you, Anneke, around, could you explain in a bit more detail around Bestseller's traceability solutions and, like, practically speaking, how this works?
Yes. So what we did is, I think we started 5 years ago with working directly with the farmers on the ground, mainly in India, where we said we would like to purchase the cotton, pay the premium to the farmers, and then actually work the way up, like what you said, Hendrik. But what does it mean? Then link that cotton, the cotton lint that's coming from there, to the spinners, and then through our supply chain. So bottom up rather than top down. I don't know if that would answer the question.
To make it traceable.
To make it traceable, indeed.
Yeah,
Yes.
clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks so much. So we are approaching the end of the panel already, but I would like to give each of the panelists a chance to kind of state what is the key wish that you have from your perspective for this system change in the landscapes that we talked about. Maybe starting with you, Stephen.
I mean, I think on the panel we have pioneering companies. We have a pioneer foundation. We have pioneering NGOs and measurement providers. I think what's needed to scale the RPLC landscapes is to involve and engage a group of mainstream finance providers in solving the problem of how to get these landscapes to scale and bring them in earlier to help with some of the definition around metrics and what information needs to be provided, bring them into the ecosystem that is trying to solve this problem, rather than assuming that at some point in the future there will be things they will want to invest in. Find who those financial institutions are and bring them into this ecosystem would be my one recommendation, I think.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Making them an integrated part of the solution and the discussion. Thanks. Litul.
Yeah, so I think since morning we have heard about place-based solution, collaboration, and I think thanks to FFE, this small panel itself is like diverse set of stakeholders, and then if you go down to the landscape level, there's even more, there's community and the government and all. So I think my key takeaway is, collaboration is essential, and I think for especially from the private sector and the brand perspective, I think we need to go there where the commodity is produced, know the context better, and also participate in the transformation. So I would invite everyone here to come and be part of this our ambition of reaching 50 million hectares of regenerative production landscapes.
I can just second that. I mean, I would also like to see that all these farmers and the farming communities in practicing regenerative agriculture and in restoring a landscape is a service to all of us here. We know the state of our world. We know what's happening. We know that a lot of action, large-scale action, and I think that's why we need to talk about landscapes, is required. So now the question is, how can we support? And I think very important to look at supply chains and where commodities coming from and what is our responsibility as not just companies, it's the consumers, ultimately the companies provide a service, but it's our responsibility to also look at how can we support beyond just paying a price for commodity that again focuses at just a field and not the whole ecosystem and environment around.
Thanks. Yeah, it's also a bit our individual responsibility, right? Yeah. Heleen.
Yeah, I guess very similar. I guess I would just also want to invite more brands to come on board and support the RPLCs. because I really feel like we're on a mission here to prove that creating climate resilient sourcing regions are actually also very good value for companies. You know, it makes their supply chains more climate resilient as well. And it is an approach where I guess the more companies we have on board and financially contributing, there are certain economies of scale that will come in. And so it will then become cheaper for brands because they will all get more and more benefits from it if we can pool more investment.
Yeah, thanks. Bit of a call to action, right? Yeah, Anneke.
Yeah, what's there to add? I mean, most things have been said, but yeah, I really hope that we get more like-minded brands that see the needs for, you know, the landscape, holistic view of sourcing as well to join our PLC. And I even hope that we can look beyond this industry and look at other industry, because we're not the only industry sourcing. There's other industries sourcing from the same landscape. So it would be fantastic as we can, you know, as different industries, different stakeholders in the landscape work together to figure out how we can manage the systemic change that we're working on.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, that's a good point. Beyond the fashion industry, right? I also hope, and I get to voice of wish as well. I mean, we are advising a lot of large companies also on their climate and nature journeys. And I see this, you know, to really have this resilience that we are talking about, adding the value, but also reducing the risks. A multitude of different approaches are necessary. And I'm strongly convinced that landscape work is one of the key initiatives that need to be integrated into that portfolio. And so now I have two more things, right? Thanks a lot to this fantastic panel. And the second point is, there is this space more or less here in the middle of this room where the RPLC, where you can learn a lot more about the RPLC in India, in Tanzania, etc. There's also a QR code where you can download the brochure and get access to the contacts. And just after this panel, there will also be a short video be played here on the screen that explains the landscape work further, where all the stakeholders and partners have been involved. Thanks so much for your questions as well, and thanks so much for this rich discussion on the panel.
Thank you, Sabine.
Thank you.
Across the world, smallholder farmers rely on land to survive. As its custodians, they are the backbone behind industries that provide us with food and clothing. Current sourcing methods rely on conventional farming practices, which degrade the land and threaten ecosystems, livelihoods, and the supply of commodities. RPLC is a model for sustainable sourcing, a global movement aimed at restoring ecosystems, strengthening climate resilience, and mitigating supply chain risks. A regenerative production landscape collaborative looks beyond individual farms, addressing issues specific to the region and prioritizing long-term ecosystem health. Currently operational in India, Brazil, Tanzania, and Pakistan, the 4 RPLCs are managed by a network of conveners brought together by LAUDES Foundation. The collaborative brings together diverse stakeholders within the landscape, including governments, CSOs, businesses, and farmers who work side by side to create long-term value for everyone. Aligning on the unique challenges of each ecosystem, stakeholders collaborate to identify systemic issues and implement targeted regional solutions to address those challenges. The collaborative focuses on 6 impact areas: restoring soil health, improving smallholder farmer incomes, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, enhancing water management, preserving biodiversity, advancing gender equity, and is building a framework to support brands and investors in measuring, reporting, and verifying these impacts. RPLC's goal is to convert 50 million hectares into regenerative production landscapes by 2035, and we're already making positive strides towards this. Join us on a movement to make supply chains and the ecosystems that depend on them more resilient.